Hello and welcome to another video of our SOLIDWORKS C# Standalone series, and today we're going to be adding code to our user interface. We'll start first with the browse, remove and add buttons with the browse. We're going to browse to a directory, and let's put that directory in the title of the form. With remove and add, remove will basically remove the selected custom property row in the grid view, and add will basically add a new custom property. For the add method, we're going to be using the Microsoft.visual basic input box. C# doesn't have one, so I figured that would be the easiest way to add input rather than just designing our own input form, because that can be sometimes tedious. So without further ado, let's begin. So let's go ahead. First of all, add a reference to Microsoft Microsoft.visual basic. So I'll just go here and add a reference to this assembly, and I'll just go ahead and go double click, go to the forms class, and I'm going to using Microsoft.visual, and this will allow us to use the input class. Now this is a method from that we've used earlier in an earlier video rather, and now let's start adding code. So the first thing that we are going to add, let's just keep this for the SW app that we're gonna be using that later. So the first thing, as I said, we're gonna be defining would be a list or a binding list of our custom property objects. So a binding list basically can be set to the source of the data grid view, and it would allow the benefit of using a binding list is that it allows a two-way communication. So we can it's not a read-only, so we can edit it, we can remove objects, and those changes that we're going to make on the binding list from the code, they're going to be represented in the grid view, so we don't have to touch the grid view much. Let's go ahead and define that. So I'll just we'll call this binding list of custom property object, and let's call this custom properties equals to new binding list. All right, let's call this custom properties list. And second, so even though we didn't have to do that until later, it's a good way to put that out of the way. Second, let's go back to the buttons that we said we're going to add the code to. So let's begin with a browse. So browse will basically grab a directory that we're going to process. So let's add a variable here and call it directory, and we call this string directory. At first it's going to be always string empty. Now let's go back to the form, go to the browse button right here, and it looks like we have browse 2 points. Let me add another point there, and then double click on it. It's gonna add an event handler, and this is the event handling method. And let's start by adding the browse click event. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be launching a folder browse dialog. So let's folder browse dialog, and let's call this folder browse dialog with a different letter casing equals to new folder browse dialog. So if folder browse dialog, the result of it, rather, sorry, the result of the show dialog method equals to dialog result. Okay, that means that the user has pressed OK, and obviously this is a method, so it needs the two parentheses. We are going to get this string to get the directory. So the way that we do that is that we go ahead and go to directory equals to folder browse dialog selected path. Alright, after that we are going to set the code. Let's just leave this for now. So set the forums title, the forums text, title text. So as I said, we want our form to have in its title right here to have the directory. So we'll just let's call this method set form text, and let's just add it for now. Let's add it here, private set form text, and private void. And what's going to happen here basically is that we are going to throw a new not implemented error, so that if we forget to implement it later, this error will grab our attention. So let me just minimize this. So let's collapse it, and that's gonna set the directory. The next thing that we want to do is to remove a custom property or to add a custom property. So to remove a custom property, basically we are going to use the binding list that we've created, the custom property binding list. So to remove one, we're gonna have to traverse for each var data grid view row. Let's call this row in data grid view dot rows, right? And we're gonna check if the row that we are traversing is not the new row. So we can basically go to the data grid view and remove the new row. So if you go back here, the new row is basically a row, a blank row that appears at the end of the data grid view. So we are checking here, if the row that we are traversing is actually that new row, because we can't pretty much edit that or delete that. So what we are going to do is to go ahead and call the custom property, the custom properties list, and we are going to go rows. We're going to go to the data grid view. Data grid view, rows, delete, remove, and we're going to remove that row. Simple as that. And as soon as we remove this row, the custom properties binding list will update on its own. If we had used a list of the custom property object, then obviously it's not going to update the list. So that's for the remove method. So let's go now to, we did the browse, now we go to the add method, and in the add method we are going to be using the Visual Studio input box, right? So what we are going to do is we can define the name of the custom property. So let's call that var name equals interaction input box, and then let's just write a simple message here, add name. So if the name is not null or white space, let's keep it at that, then we are going to proceed to get the value, or rather if the name is null, then we're going to return return here, it's going to return void. So I can just perhaps send a message saying custom property cannot have an empty name. Well, actually, we don't actually, there's no need for this, because if the user clicks on cancel, then obviously the name is going to be empty, so that wouldn't be consistent. So next thing is, if the name is not null or it's not empty, we are going to define a value, and this value is gonna be from another interaction input box. So interaction input box, and here add value. Add value up. And what we are going to do now, actually we should be saying add evaluated value, but that can be ambiguous in a way. So just add value for now. That should be fair enough. If you want to change it later, we'll do that. Now we are going to define this new custom property. So var custom property equals new custom property object, and we're gonna give this a name, and we're gonna give this a value, the value, and it's also asking us for the new val. So the new val, obviously it's going to be empty, right? String empty. And we are going to check, we have to check if this custom property exists in our lists. If so, we are going to override it. So when the user clicks and adds a custom property that already exists, then obviously the new custom property has to override the older one. The new one will have to override the older one. So basically, we need to check if existing custom property equals to custom properties, the find, and what we are going to be looking for here is, sorry, let's find, I have to put the X here, find X name equals to name of the custom property. All right. Obviously here, find doesn't exist in the binding list, so we will have to go ahead and convert this to a list. To a list, does it exist? Obviously it does exist. To a list. This will basically convert the binding list to a list, and then we can use the find to find what we are looking for. Alright, so if it exists, that's going to return so the existing custom property. Then we need to check if existing custom property is not null. Then go ahead, custom properties, and remove, the existing custom property. If not, or rather, we're always at the end going to add a custom property. So the new custom property. So add custom property. Sorry. All right. So this is the code for the add method. So let's just add a comment here. Check if custom property exists. All right. Now we've added the add button, the remove button, the browse button. Let's go ahead and add another method here that's gonna enable and disable the user interface when we click the process button. So when we click process, we want the entire interface, especially this button, to be disabled so the user can't touch them, except for the cancel button, obviously. That's when the user clicks it and it cancels the process. So let's go back and let's add a new method. Let's call it set buttons enabled, and this will take a boolean cancel. So if it's cancel true, we're gonna enable the button. If cancel is if cancel is true, yes, if cancel is true, we are going to um, enable the buttons, obviously, and if cancel is false, we're going to do the other way around. So cancel button enabled, oh sorry, SW cancel button, SW cancel enabled equals cancel, and then the browse button SW browse enabled equals always the opposite of the cancel. And then the rest of the buttons, the add button, so SW add, it's going, sorry, SW add, it's going to be as well the opposite, or rather the opposite of cancel. Moving on to remove, SW remove enabled equals to cancel, and then SW remove and SW process as well enabled equals to cancel. Right. All right. Moving on. Now let's go ahead. I think perhaps let's go back to the set forms. Perhaps I want to go back to the set forms code and change it that the set forms that the set form text. All right. So what we are going to do here is the following. We're going to check if the path is not null. So if string if string is not null, folder directory rather, then the if it's null, then we're going to take the directory of the application. So directory, it's going to be equals to system input output path get directory name system dot reflection dot assembly dot get executing assembly dot location. And what this does basically is that it let me just try to maximize or increase the font size. So what this does basically is that if the directory is null, which is going to be the case, or empty, it's going to be the case when we launch the application, when we start debugging, then obviously the directory is going to be that of the folder where the compiled assembly exists. We're gonna see this in just a second. Afterwards, we're gonna define another variable. Let's call it double%, and we're also gonna add the percentage double% equal new double. And this basically is going to this is basically like given 0, not much of a difference. So here we're gonna get the percentage. So the percentage is going to be the number of the files, rather, the file at which it's the number, the index of the file that's being processed divided by the total number of files. So at first, we need to think to define another, let's call it another array. So let's call this files, and this is going to be an array of strings. Yeah, let's keep it as files. No need to define it as a list. So if files is null, or the file length is equal to 0, then the percent will always be at 0. Percent equals 0. The other way around would be as else the percent then will be the percent will be equal to the progress bar, our SW progress bar value multiplied by 10, divided by files length multiplied by 110, so that we can get this multiplication just guarantees that the percent will always be an integer, will always be in double. So we have to remove this from here, and that basically gives us the sets the percentage to the right value that's going to be based on the progress bar that we'll tackle later when we process the files. Finally, we're going to just set the text. So this is what the method does. So set var text string format. We are going to first of all get the first parameter here. That's going to be the percentage. And afterwards we're gonna give the name of the directory here, and after that let's just add CADHero. So that's going to be the percentage times 100. So the percentage will be in decimal, and it will be a decimal value. So let's times 100. And let's add that to a string and format it to 2 decimal places. And afterwards, we're going to take the directory and we'll call this, add the third one, we'll call it CADHero. Alright, so we are missing the 2 parentheses here. Alright, and finally, this text equals to text. Just change this to SW. Let's change this to form title. That's more consistent. So if I go back to the form, and I've actually not called this method from the load form here. So let's just call it here to check if the method is executed properly. And let's click on start. Let's just give it a second here. And I think it is actually doing exactly what it's supposed to. Yep, so there you have it, the percentage, then the directory of where this little application is located at, and then we appended it with CADHero. Good. Now let's go back to the form code, and let me start by perhaps adding the files and the custom property. Let's go and perhaps, I don't know what we're going to do now exactly. Let's go ahead and add code to the process method. Well, let's go ahead and do that. So this is going to be the process method right here, and this process method is going to be, I think, async. Sorry. So this has to be on this side. All right. Um, so the process method is going to start by getting the SW app first. So we get the SOLIDWORKS application, and after that we'll start processing the files. It looks like that we have added a timer label, so we need to take care of that as well. But let's put that at towards the end. Let's get started with processing or adding code to the process method. So first of all, let's go ahead and so the process method will begin by getting the files first. So helper dot get CAD files from directory, and our directory will be the directory that we have chosen. Now, if the directory equals to null, then we are going to return it's equal to null, or if directory is equal to null, if files. So if files length is equal to 0, then return as well. Right. Now we need maybe to start the timer here. Start timer here. We'll get back to that. So to do start timer. Now let's add a try block here, and let's begin by setting the SW app as await helper. Where is it? Where is it? Sorry, not in the helper. What am I writing? It's in the singlet tone. So get application async. So that gets us SOLIDWORKS. Let's make SOLIDWORKS visible. And I think we did that, didn't we? Let's just go back here. This is singlet tone. No, we are not making SOLIDWORKS visible. Alright. Now let's go back to the form designer, the forms class. And after we make SOLIDWORKS visible, what we want to do is to create a cancellation token source. So let's call this cancellation source equals new cancellation token source, and we need to add using system.threading. Now after we add this cancellation source, we're gonna pass this to the method that's gonna process the file after we traverse the files array. So for now, let's add some comments here. So declare cancellation source. We're going to use the token actually, cancel token source token, and we're going to pass it to the method that's going to process the file. Now we are going to set the buttons. So let's we've made a small typo here, so let's go back and change that. So we're gonna set it to true, right? So that's gonna set the cancel button to that's gonna enable the cancel button that we should actually disable. If you go back to the form here, this little guy here should be disabled at start. So where's enabled? It should be somewhere up in this list. Alright, false. And sorry. And this is gonna set the buttons. Actually, let's call it enable buttons. Set button. set buttons enable set. I always battle with finding a good name for a method. So let's go back in here and let's change that here. Now, after that, we are going to we need to also reset the status of these guys here and the status bar. Why do we need to reset the status? Reset the the status strip. We need to do that because when we launch the application, it's going to be set to these default value. But after the first run, after the first process, or after we first process the first batch, we are going to need to reset these values towards the we can either reset them right after the processing finishes, but that's not actually a good approach. We want, as soon as the application finishes the directory, processing a directory, we want these to retain these other values. If this is going to be 100%, this is going to be the time that it took, and this is going to be the last file. So we always want to reset as soon as the button process is clicked. And let's add another method here, and let's call it let's call it reset status strip, and it's going to be private void. And what we are going to do inside is we are basically going to set the process, the SW process progress bar values to 1. I'm just trying to find some information here in my notes. So we are going to set the progress bar value to, so here we are going to progress bar SW progress bar value to 0, SW progress bar maximum to 0 as well. Progress bar step, well, actually we don't need to do that. SW progress bar value to, rather the step, well, to 1. We don't need to set the step from the, it's either we do it here or we do it in the form. So let's just do that in the form. That's way much better, and we're much consistent as well. So SW progress step equals 1. Let's do that there. And tool strip, rather SW status. What did we call it? The timer is equals to 0. The label SW label. Should we change the label? No, the label which will change on its own. No, we shouldn't change them. We'll just set the values to 0, that's all. That's all we need. And we'll get another method here, and it'll set it completes. Sometimes when we get the percentage, it's going to be 99.9%, so we might as well just cheat a bit here and set it to complete. Set the maximum here. So SW progress bar, the value to the files dot length. Yep. We'll set that. And maybe let's Let's keep it that way. I was thinking about adding complete in the SW file name, but that's fair enough. We don't need to do that. All right, so reset status strip. Next. Let's go back to our process method. So here for each string, yep, that's the file in files. We are going to process the files. And how do we do that? Let's add another method here. So we're gonna here invoke. What's the name of the method that we created earlier? Let's go back here to helper. We are going to invoke process model, but we need to do it in an async fashion. So the way that we do that is by, let's add another method here, private task. This is going to return a task of Boolean, and let's call it get process model or process model async. Okay, and this one is going to take the cancellation token that we will hand from the source token, and obviously a string as the file name. This will return await task of Boolean dot run. No, we can't use await. It's going to return the task itself. So return task of Boolean dot run. And we are going to return here helper dot process model. This is gonna take SW app. It's gonna take the file name. It's going to take the custom properties, and it's going to take the cancellation token. So it's gonna take token. And you have to convert this to a list. Alright. So we go back here and we declare another Boolean await process process model async. It's gonna take a cancellation token. Say this is called token. Sorry, cancel source dot token, and it's gonna take the file for the file name. Now, if and only if the return value is if the return value is null. Actually, it doesn't matter what it returns. We're simply going to we're going to change the SW file name. We'll give the file name, and sorry, this should be .text, and we are going to set the progress bar value, and we're going to up it by 1, right? And we're going to set the form text. That's it, right? After all of this stuff, obviously, if things run accordingly, Then we need to set the button spec state back to false, and we need to call colon complete status strip, and we are going to invoke complete status strip, and we are going to dispose of SOLIDWORKS since we don't need it anymore, right? Here we need to stop the timer. Alright, if unfortunately there's an exception, we are going to do the same. We are going to let's display that exception in the SW file name, and let's text, and let's write an error has occurred, and let's perhaps add the error message. Doesn't say much if we add the message of the exception. We also might need to add the stack trace to give the exact line of what was happening or where this exception was thrown, but we might need to create a logger for that. Maybe we'll do that another time. I wonder. So let's just keep it. Let's just render the message error. That's all. And right, we're gonna render the error. If SWApp is not null, then I'm gonna stop timer, right? And we're going to dispose of SOLIDWORKS, close SOLIDWORKS, and we're gonna set again the buttons to false. So we are re-enabling them. All right. So let's add a to-do comment here. To-do, we're gonna be searching that later on. Sorry. All right.